I don't want to bag on machine tool builders, but I'll bag on machine tool builders for a little bit. They are really resistant to change because, what's their incentive to put something on an open standard? Not a whole lot.
All right, welcome everyone. This week I have Pete Oxenham, a founder of Chatter, software that help your CNC machine to be smarter and just talk to you.
Yeah.
I think that's the best description, and that's what excites me a lot.
Yeah, pretty much. Like you said, my name's Pete. I'm based out of Sacramento, California. My background was as a machine shop owner, and then accidentally fell into this world of software, making connectivity software for machines, just basically trying to take the state of the technology surrounding our industry of machining up to, maybe at least 2010 levels. But really, I mean, in all seriousness, I kind of noticed in my shop that the software layer of sort of the real-time running of the shop was really not where it should be, and these machines have so much information that we can use to run our shops inside of them. So I started building a bunch of tools internally at my shop, and then that is what became Chatter.
And that's what's really exciting, because again, I view your tool pretty much as the smart home device, almost a smart home device, in regard of the CNC machine, of course, because again, I'm a big fan of the smart home, and like pretty much everything that I can automate at my home, I did that. So not everything works as, as it should, but at least you kind of make all the things that you have in your home like smarter. And it's amazing. It's amazing, and at the same time, in CNC world specifically, we're dealing with the machines that not cheap first, they are definitely very complex second, and they can actually capable to produce super high quality things, but at the same time, they're not smart enough, right? So they're really not smart enough. And I was always wondering, so what actual manufacturers do about that? So are they thinking about making them not only more smarter, but also more open, maybe from the ecosystem perspective? Are they manufacturers out there that are thinking about that? Or maybe some of them way ahead of others? So what's up there?
Well, since we're in the manufacturing industry, I have to clarify. Do you mean the machine tool builders or the people who are using the machines?
Machine tool builders, yeah.
Yeah. So the builders are tough. Honestly, it's one of the biggest problems that we ran up against at the beginning. When I was starting this out, was just trying to figure out, like, how the heck do we start talking to everything? And the first machine I ever integrated to was my Enshu GE480H. So it's a big old horizontal with a FANUC control on it. And to give you a sense of how archaic this industry is, I literally had to buy a DVD from FANUC with the drivers on there, like their DLLs. Mm-hmm. It was like a $30 DVD, probably the cheapest thing FANUC sells. So I was like, screw it, I'll pay for the overnight shipping. Like, if I'm getting such a good deal on this. But it's just like the software development kit to, like, hey, like, here's the language that this machine speaks, and then you can start talking to it. And FANUC has a really, really serious, we call it in software, like API, right? You're familiar with APIs. I don't know if the audience is, but they have a serious API on their machines that can do a whole lot of stuff, because it was built typically for interfacing with robots, with pallet systems. Really, you can fully control the machine through this thing called Focus. So with FANUC specifically, it was like, oh, the sky's the limit. We can do pretty much anything we want with this. But, as you sort of mentioned, not everything's FANUC. There's a lot of machine tool builders out there. And to answer your question, it's sort of all over the place. So typically, pretty much everybody has their own proprietary protocol. So like FANUC, I kind of regard as at the top because everything is super, super solid with them. But then you go down the chain and, every machine tool builder or control builder sort of speaks their own language. And you've got the folks like, you've got a protocol for Brother, you got a protocol for Haas, you've got a protocol for, Heidenhain, right? A protocol for Siemens. And then on top of that, there's all these standard protocols, which I think a lot of people have heard of: MT Connect and also OPC UA. MT Connect and OPC UA are sort of two different communication standards. Like, MT Connect's not like a piece of software that you necessarily download to monitor your machines, but it's just a standard for data, essentially. So the folks at MT Connect set out with a really, noble mission, which is like, how do we get everything speaking the same language? But I don't want to bag on machine tool builders, but I'll bag on machine tool builders for a little bit. They are really resistant to change because, what's their incentive to put something on an open standard? Not a whole lot, especially given that depending on who the machine tool builder is, like, FANUC's a good example. They're only selling it for $30. They don't care about paywalling. It's just the cost to write up the PO for the the disk, but they don't care about paywalling their API. But there are other companies who sell their SDKs for thousands of dollars, right? And they license options and stuff for the machines. So it's just all over the map, and they are not super keen on getting an open standard. And then the other thing is they tend to sell their own monitoring solution. Now, the problem is in my shop, we had Fanuc and we had Haas, right? Yep. I'm not going to have two different pieces of software that have different capability sets, different logins, one like the Save a Brother machine, like you can do on-prem. You can go to that machine's IP and it can show you what it's doing. And then you end up setting up port forwarding or something so you can see it from elsewhere, but then it can't text you or email you or log a whole lot. And, Grobe sells one. Well, maybe the Grobe one's different, right? So now you have Brothers and Grobes, two different systems. One's through your network, one's through their service, one's email, one you have to go to. So anyways, all that to say, the whole thing is a mess. Yep. And the MT Connect folks wanted to get machines speaking MT Connect. Now, some manufacturers did a really, this is just like a bit of a history of this because it's interesting, at least to nerds. Some manufacturers really jumped on and said, yeah, we see this as the wave of the future. We want to be part of it. So shout out to Mazak, right? They did incredible work developing connectors for their machines that follow the standards and help develop the standards. It's an open standard, so they're on the committee. And they even on their site expose publicly showroom machines so you can develop an MT Connect connector on a real Mazak machine that's just on a public IP, which is awesome. Right. Mm-hmm. And then the next tier down are manufacturers who were resistant, but then the MT Connect people who are great folks wanted to be able to get these machine tool builders on board. But again, machine tool builders, very resistant to change. So they had to, in my opinion, water down the standard a bit in order to get machine tool builders to come on board. Because if you were going to be really rigid about the data has to be this way and that way and go through all these revs, you're already begging them to be with MT Connect already. And now on top of that, you've introduced this challenge of saying, okay, you said yes to the thing we were begging you to do, but you did it wrong, and we're going to hold you. So basically what happened is they ended up having to water down the standard to the point where an implementation actually, I'm not going to name the name of the manufacturer. I don't want to bring heat on them, but there are implementations out there that are native to the manufacturer that totally don't follow what you'd expect MT Connect to be. So it makes things really, really hard. And then the third tier, so C for effort, D for effort, right? And then the third tier down is the folks who just say, you know what, we don't want to deal with it, right? We have our own thing, and it may or may not be good enough. In Fanuc's case, they don't offer MT Connect themselves, but their API is really good, right? And you still got to develop something to talk to MT Connect anyways, so it is kind of a wash. But that kind of leads into what happened with the whole Industry 4.0, all this digital factory stuff. It's just all these buzzwords that ended up being pushed by a lot of consultants, and I'm sorry out there if you are an integrator or consultant, you do great work, and there really is a place in our industry for you, but for the general small and mid-sized shops, this doesn't work, right? Oh, I want to connect, this machine and that machine. Okay, cool. You got to find some consultant or somebody or some company who sells a box that they've written their own MT Connect adapter. So they know the language that, let's say, a Mitsubishi machine speaks, and then they've written an MT Connect adapter, and you have to buy for $2 or $3 or $4,000 this thing that's going to just sit on your network and do nothing but map data into MT Connect format. And I get why they charge that much for it, because it's a super small market and somehow you have to make back your money you spent developing the thing. But at the end of the day, it's what the heck? It's just that nobody's telling me what the standard is that you're talking to, and then you're piping it through. So this is a mess. So that got to my initial frustration and why I started Chatter. It's funny you brought up the smart home thing, is I was like, how come there's not something that I can take and put in my shop and scan a QR code and it just hooks up like a Nest camera? These machines are on the network. We can put all the services and tracking and all that stuff in the cloud. I just need something that's going to run that whole kind of data flow and make it secure and do all that. So that's sort of how Chatter was born. And, it speaks the languages of all sorts of different machines. Basically, the machines that we support, some we talk to via MT Connect, some we talk to via their native protocols. We prefer the native protocols because they just have more capability. And then we sort of standardize that and then send it all onto Chatter. So you're looking at a Brother machine the same as you are as a Fanuc machine, same as you are a Haas machine. So I kind of just wanted to get in here, clean up this mess, make it easier, make it cheaper. And then from a product standpoint, you look at the actual deliverables of the majority of IoT machine monitoring stuff. We've been trying to get away from the phrase machine monitoring. You look at the deliverables on a lot of machine monitoring. And in my opinion, it wasn't what I needed for my shop, because we just had a few machines and a few employees. we're doing our best to keep these machines running. I don't need a report at the end of the month that tells me I had 70% uptime. It's like, dude, I can hear the machines. And it's like a fire drill every time one's down. So what I wanted to build into Chatter was like basically these layers on top. So the first thing we actually did with Chatter is I wanted to solve an acute running problem. So rather than measuring that red time on the bar, right, I wanted to take the red time and make it smaller. So we were looking at this. All right, what do we spend a lot of time on? Big problem is where I'll be at my desk working on something, programming parts that are coming in or quoting or whatever. And then John, one of our machinists, would come in and he'd say, hey, Pete, Enshu's done. What's up next? And I go, oh, crap, right? I've got... Yeah. One sec, John. Let me just post the program out real quick. I'll have the flash drive to you in a sec. I got to run over, grab those tools. I'll put them next to the machine. Let me find that fixture. I'm pretty sure he started on the stock. Let me check. Yada, 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 right? It's this whole fire drill. And everybody's stressed out. We're like, let's get this machine back up and running because we know, if we had a traditional monitoring system, it would be tracking us. And our goals are to get 80% uptime or whatever. It's like, all right, let's do this a little bit differently. How about we track, because we did like, short to mid-range production. Anywhere between 50 and 1,000 or 2,000 parts was like sort of our sweet spot. So it was stuff that would run for, usually we were retooling a machine every like 3 days to 2 weeks, right? So pretty often. So it was like, all right, can we use the part counter tracking to basically extrapolate out when is this job going to be done? Let's say, and this is something I was doing manually on a calculator, and I was like, wait, software can just do this, right? All right, we get like 10 parts per pallet, and the pallet takes an hour, right? And then we extrapolate out over, simple division and multiplication and subtraction. You figure out how many hours you got left on this run. So I was like, well, the computer should do this because it's a moving target too. Maybe we make a change to the program that makes it faster. Maybe we end up making it slower to get better tool life, whatever it might be. So that was the first feature we introduced, and it honestly just changed the entire way the shop ran in our context, because rather than that panic, it turned into me in the morning looking, okay, this thing's going to be done just about after lunch. While I'm having my coffee, make sure all the tools are ready. Let me get the cart together, whatever. Mid-morning, rolled over. Hey, John, here's the stuff for the next job. Got the tools on there for you. He's like, cool, all right. I'm going to load this pallet right before lunch. I see that, it's right around my lunch. It's going to be ready, so I'll load it right before lunch. We get our last run out of it, and then I'll be back after lunch to retool the machine, and it's not going to sit idle. And it was a game changer, right? So that was sort of when it clicked for me. Sorry that I'm rambling, but I'll finish this point in a moment. That's when it sort of clicked to me, like what we want to do here has way less to do with actually measuring productivity metrics and a lot more to do with building little acute tools to solve where our pain points in the shop are. So over time, that's grown. There's that feature still, which is one I love, but a lot of shops run different ways, right? So we have, what I find with a lot of Chatter users is they kind of have like one or two killer features for them that work really well in their context. So for some people, it's like the text message notifications. They just live and die by that. And one text is just going to save them like a boatload of money because they got this machine that's supposed to be running overnight. They're down the street and they see, it's not running. Let me go change it. And then they didn't have all that idle time. The other thing, the notifications, what I liked about it is, sorry if I'm overselling it, it takes a lot of like mental stress off of you because like once you get used to that workflow where as long as Chatter is not bugging you and you don't hear from it, everything's set. You don't have to worry about a thing, and then you can focus on what you're doing. So yeah, a bunch of stuff like that, and that's sort of been the fun of building Chatter out, is kind of doing it that way rather than just like rearranging reports.
That's very cool. And again, like for the planning purposes is great. It's exact planning that you need for your shop, right? So to know exactly when this job, going to finish and all of that. And just, of course, like overall just notification, like if it's like still going or not, which is quite important, of course. Very interesting stuff about the just ecosystem around API connectivity with CNC and all of that. Because like, as you probably know, in the smart home environments, it's at least 3 or 4 protocols. So it's Zigbee, it's Z-Wave, it's Matter, and maybe a few more. And basically, somehow, even though it's like it's ginormous number of the smart devices on the market, just ginormous. It's really monumental task to basically build something that talking to all the protocols, that talking to all the devices and everything. So that's something that, for example, Home Assistant does, right? So ginormous task. And again, it's done not just by a couple persons, just whole community that building that. And yeah, of course, we're talking about consumer market versus like basically business, in CNC. But do you envision like if this is something that can happen, like one protocol for all the CNC machines or couple protocols for all the CNC machines, maybe?
I wish.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see how it plays out. I mean, my vision of the future really is, I mean, you shouldn't even have to think about what the protocol is. It should just connect. And that's sort of like I want to do the dirty work for you in a way, like in terms of like you've got these machines or whatever. There's some settings you're gonna have to set on the machine, or like if it's a Siemens, you might have to buy an option or whatever, depending on the machine, how it's set up. But at the end of the day, once that's all set, I really hope that the future looks like, and I'm working towards the future looking like, you don't have to worry about any of that. It's just like the machines are on the network. Now, my long vision and kind of what you're like asking about that I would love to see for the industry is that every machine should just have like, you know how you log in with Google somewhere, like OAuth, right?
Mm-hmm.
It should have, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be that slick, but it should have something like it like that on there that is agnostic, right? Where you can have this machine, you plug it in, and you say, okay, I'm choosing. Actually, this is probably a little bit more akin to like streaming. Like if you've ever done Twitch streaming, there's like a protocol out there, and then you say, hey, I'm going to be streaming to this. They give you a key, right? They give you an ID and a key. The idea is you just type that into the machine. And it would call out and it would say, all right, like we're hooking you up to Chatter. And then hopefully that would work for really any other machine connectivity platform as well, because competition is good. That's sort of what drives the market forward. And right now, like just as somebody like myself, like, we want to have moats in a way, but really we want to compete on the merit of the product itself. And the history of this industry has been so much lock-in and gatekeeping because it's, you got to get this adapter, this integration, this, all this stuff, right? That makes it really freaking hard to have any competition, because by the time they've spent X amount of time integrating some system that is, they're getting better. I think Chatter is a much better experience than what was out there when I started, and I'm seeing other ones get better as well. But like by the time some like super legacy system, by the time you get that thing set up in your shop, you're like, I don't want to deal with this ever again. And so there's like no like real opportunity for like perfect competition in the industry. So now how it gets there, like just seeing the hurdles that the MT Connect crew had to go through just to get like some good implementations and some frankly unusable implementations shipping on machines, and all the compromises that had to be made there, that does scare me. It's like, how do we get to this future? But really, I mean, my vision, at least for the Chatter side of it, is let's just continue to make it easier and easier. There are some things that, like integrating different controls that, I can't convince Fanuc. Well, actually, Fanuc is really easy. Fanuc is one setting, but like I can't convince any number of machine tool builders to make their process for enabling the connectivity stuff any easier. But what I can do, which I've spent a lot of time doing, is write good documentation that's easy to read, so people aren't digging up user manuals. It's just like, hey, you have Chatter. All right, I have a brother machine, and then you go to our site, and there's really nice screenshots and everything, and putting videos together, because since we don't have much sway over what the machine tool builders do, even if we are compatible with them, all we can do is make that process of getting the machine side of things enabled, we can make that as easy as possible. So then when it comes to bring in Chatter, it's like the Chatter setup itself doesn't take nearly any effort once you've got the machine set.
Yeah, I think it's inevitable, or I hope that's inevitable for machine builders, that at some point, not only if you want to be competitive, but also like if you want more shops to to purchase your equipment, so you need to be almost plug and play for everything, not just for setup and machine, but also like machine tracking, notifications, all of that. Because again, this has become a part of the business, right? It's not just about the machining itself, but it's also about the business of machining. So, and of course, you want to be either partner with a company like Chatter, or build it yourself internally and be more competitive with, in comparison with others. So again, I still have high hopes in this industry. And again, much like you, I started about 10 years ago, and when I started, I was like really pissed off. Like, okay, so it's a really, really extremely legacy space in comparison to like basically any other consumer or business SaaS spaces and anything like that. And again, so a lot of the tools that we built in our software, again, we just built from scratch because we don't have access to anything, to API, to documentation, licensing, anything. So everything from scratch. And again, I think a lot of the people in the machining/software world complaining about exactly that again, it's a legacy industry, it's a foundational industry for the country and everything, but at the same time, it's like really, really back like in like 20 or 30 years 40 years, from what it should be. So okay, cool. So let's switch the topic.
I will
Okay,
add
go
one
ahead.
positive note to that.
Okay, go ahead.
To end on for that topic. The good part is we're at sort of an inflection point, and timing's a lot with a lot of this stuff, and I think we're at an inflection point where the majority of machines sold today are compatible with a system like Chatter, right? They have networking and they have some sort of protocol that they can speak over the network. That really wasn't the case. Let's see, it's 2025. Yeah, so 10 years ago, that wasn't the case. Haas Classic controls had serial ports on them, not Ethernet ports generally, right? So the timing's good where enough of the more legacy machines have cycled out. So while we might not have the perfect, beautiful, everything's perfectly compatible over the network world, we're leaps and bounds from where we were 10 years ago because the machines have protocols and have Ethernet ports. The trajectory is good. There's no need for pessimism.
And it was just 10, it was just 10 years, right? So it's really fast to by the machining standards, I guess. Yeah. Cool. So let's talk about your background a bit because again, look, you're not typical machinist or you're not typical engineer. So you're basically in this intersection of software nerd and also like machinist and engineer. So how you get to that point? So like, what's your background? How it all started?
Yeah. So I'll just give the whole story. It starts off basically in elementary school. I was just a computer nerd growing up. When I was in junior high, I begged my dad for a static IP at our house, and the neighbors, they'd get rid of their old computers and oh, pizza nerd, let's give it to this kid over here down the street. And I'd go to Barnes & Noble on the weekends with my dad, get the Linux magazines, and then, they at the time they came with disks. So I'd just have all these computers and I'd install the Linux distros on them. And then from there I learned a bit about web development and obviously, Linux, sysadmin stuff and networking, as much as a 7th or 8th grader can. But did that for a while, and that's kind of what I thought my career trajectory was going to be as I was like moving into high school. And then in high school, let's see, what would this have been? I guess sophomore or junior year, I got my license, as most people do. And I got a Mustang, a 96 Mustang, and I wanted to modify it because my dad was a car guy. I didn't have much mechanical expertise or anything, but I got into modifying that a bit. And then, of course, I'm broke. I'm a high schooler, so I had to make the parts to go on it. So high school had a shop. Basically, there was they called it EST. It was an engineering program where you learned CAD, and then they had like a shop where there'd be like little shop projects with like sheet metal and stuff. But they had a few CNC machines there. They had 2 or 3 Siles. This was, let's see, so that would have been like 2011. So this was like that older, like kind of tool room style Sile mill, the big yellow ones. And then they had some Chinese machines that had the old Siemens control. And those things were a piece of crap. They couldn't even cut a circle on the mill. It was just a disaster. I was like, okay, well, I want to make these car parts. I'm putting these race parts on my car. I want to get a tow hook. I want to take to the track. I need a tow hook to like meet the track regulations, right? Yep. So I kind of have an idea in CAD of what I want to make, and I tell the instructor, and he's like, all right, well, like basically, if you can keep yourself busy in here, I'll give you an A. You don't have to follow the curriculum or anything. Just keep yourself busy and don't like hurt yourself. Don't tear off your arm. But there was no curriculum for the machines. And he's like, here's a computer. It's got Mastercam on it. Like, have a blast. And then I get into Mastercam. I'm like, oh, I know computers. I'm a smart kid. I can figure this out. And of course, like, it just fell flat on my face. So I'm like, all right, we're going to have to start with something a little bit easier. So I started with a little welding project, made a bracket for it. But from there, kind of started doing more and more machining stuff, learned how to like machine a wheel spacer. First thing I ever machined, I think, was just butterboard that I was like, all right, I got to learn how to use this mill. And to me at the time, a Sile was like scary. It's like, oh, this thing's crazy, high tech and powerful, which, today I'm like, yeah, it's a little bit of a toy, especially that one. But anyways, so finally got that. And then my grandfather, who passed away, had a bunch of like small machines for making model trains that were in storage. And I told my dad, I was like, hey, can we get these like running? Like, I want to use them in the garage. So we had this little like mini lathe, a little Atlas lathe. I don't know if they still sell them under Craftsman, but for a while they sold this small, it was a pretty common lathe under Craftsman, and then a couple manual mills and a drill press and stuff. So kind of cut my teeth on that, plus the stuff at the high school. And then the summer after high school, I wanted to basically be able to get some money to be able to buy my own CNC machine. I was selling race car parts online, had like a splitter support rod that was doing really well. And then we were selling enough of those that I figured I could cover basically I was spending enough money job shopping those out, or like on a job shop, that I was like, I can take these in-house, that'll cover a machine payment. So in order to get that money, I basically just hijacked the machines at the high school over the summer after high school, and then like after hours, which probably shouldn't have been doing, but the instructor let me, and just did work for, local like shops that like, tuner shops and stuff that want to start their own product line. A lot of like brake brackets, wheel spacers, stuff like that, where they're like, hey, here's some dimensions or a sketch. So, I'd have to actually do it up in CAD and then come up with like, what I thought were decent tolerances at the time, and then make them. So, and then from there, I got my first machine was a Haas ST10Y. I got that in 2015. Actually, it came on December 23rd, 2015. I remember because it was the day before Christmas Eve. And that was a super exciting day. But the thing I didn't really realize at the time is like, it's not a one-to-one on like how much money you're spending job shopping something out versus, oh, well, that's enough for a machine payment. It's like, yeah, but now you're a machine shop. So crap, right? Like I got to buy tools. I got to pay rent. Like there's just all this stuff. I got to actually run the thing. They don't just show up in boxes all perfectly deburred, etc. So from there, kind of just became a machine shop and, kept making parts for shops around and learned a bit more about engineering. And I wouldn't call myself an engineer by any means, but enough to sort of make stuff that can be made because I understood the manufacturing process. And then in the context of like cars, you can figure out pretty well like what's going to work for a lot of this stuff. Like race car parts are not all that it's more like fabricator style engineering, but out of machined parts. So yeah, did that for a while, and then kind of, just that classic story of just working my way up through, you start with the race car parts or, for local shops, and then you start doing more and more and get another machine, get some employees, and then start taking on other kinds of work. So by the end of having the machine shop / the beginning of Chatter, we were doing a lot of parts for like electronics enclosures and things like of that nature. We did a lot of parts for like micro mobility. So one of our big clients was a company called Bird that did the electric scooters that you can rent.
Sure.
Yeah, so we did a lot of work for them, and then just some other stuff like with drones and things like that, making these electronics enclosures, and had a horizontal mill, which is really great for electronics enclosures because it's just like a bunch of aluminum, and then you need to do all these like connectors on the sides, so you can just knock those out in 2 ops really, really simple and really fast on the horizontal. So that was sort of our niche, and moved out of the car part stuff. And that's kind of what led into Chatter. And then for a while, I was running both things, and eventually kind of just had to make a decision. Do I want to keep doing the machining, or do I want to believe in Chatter and go all in on that? So, the timing of that ended up working out really well because an old friend of mine who actually worked for me for a while, he was looking to start a shop, and he hit me up. He's like, hey, like, what kind of machines should I buy? Like, what kind of tooling? I'm looking for a spot. And I was like, well, this is going to sound crazy, but like, how about you just purchase my shop like in place? It comes with clients, it comes with tools, it comes with libraries, it comes with, CAD and CAM, everything already set up like beautifully, like fixtures for everything. You're not gonna have to buy your toolboxes, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, we ended up working that deal out, and I went full-time with Chatter, and, still swing by there, on a, some basis to say hi and get my hands dirty if I'm lucky. But I do miss the like machining stuff every day. It kind of sucks being a little bit more disconnected from that, but I still get my fair share of it through a computer screen, and then we'll go out to customers and stuff, which is always a blast because there's such a variety out there of shops and different processes, and to see the pace at which, especially like shops with Chatter, they tend to be like they're trying to stay on the cutting edge, right? So seeing a lot of really interesting stuff around automation, really clever things of folks. I mean, my favorite little trick I see folks do, which I'm seeing more and more of, is just doing milled parts on lathes. Like, where, obviously, like the Williman is the obvious choice for that. But even with just like more normal bar-fed lathes, like it's just such a good format for automation. right? Because you just keep it fed and it keeps spitting out parts. And then I've seen some other really clever stuff, but it's really fun to be still going around to shops and seeing what other folks are doing. And by the time I have enough money to start up my own shop again, for retirement or something, I think I'll have seen enough really, really clever things to probably steal somebody's, or not steal one person's, make some amalgamation of something clever. Like that's my dream, is I want to have some slick automation setup that nobody's thought of, because I see so many of them now, and I'm just like, dang, I wish I was, whether it's like some cool robot feeder or tray system, or there's a couple I saw recently I can't even talk about because I'd give it away and it's not mine to give away. Like there's just all these things that I'm like, oh man, I want to do this so bad, but I don't have my own shop anymore. This sucks. But we'll get there.
Yeah, definitely. Like autonomous machine shop is like is amazing. That would be amazing to have something like that when you still like primarily working not even on machining itself, but on automating everything that makes sense to automate. So your story is actually amazing because again, that's something that led me to thinking about. So it's a lot of the talks about how we can have new talents, new kids like start to thinking about the machining, start to like building their career in machining. And your story is actually remind me that it can be quite simple to start, because in your case it was okay. So you have some issue, you have your Mustang, and you need to have like something to repair or something to like to machine for all of that. So basically we need to give us our kids like something that's broken, and they need to fix it somehow without going to AliExpress, Amazon, whatever, and buying that, but instead like finding a way through machining, engineering, or something like that. Obviously, like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it was the case. Like it wasn't like AliExpress or Amazon. You can go and buy something, so you have to find another way, right, to machine that. Now it's a lot of those shortcuts, of course, available. But again, maybe we need to come up with some more complex task where you just have to start to thinking about how to solve this problem without like going and just purchasing something online, but instead like creating the process around that. So that's maybe something that can lead to that. So I just hope.
I mean, the talent pipeline is so funny to me because like you said, like necessity is the mother of invention. So for me, it's like I would have never picked up a hammer or anything, started doing anything physical if I didn't need to. I mean, the first thing that went wrong with my Mustang is the clutch went out. And I'm like, oh, crap. So I had to get under there. And so there's the necessity. And then the second part is the support system, too, around folks where, like, you need to have knowledge that's available. I was really, really blessed, and I take this anything but for granted, that, around me, I went to a high school with a machine shop. I had a grandfather who was a machinist and had machines I had access to. I have a father who knows a bunch about cars and had, who knows how much thousands of dollars worth of tools at my disposal, that even if I don't know anything about cars, I've got all the ratchets I need. I got all the sockets, everything, which you don't always have that. Like, not to put past that, I've been really blessed in that regard, but we need to make sure that like these things are accessible. One thing about computers, and just to extend your analogy further, but maybe I'm making it do a little bit more work than it was supposed to, but like it's also way cheaper, right? Like things like digitally, you see a lot of folks getting into code and software because you can have some crappy Chromebook, and as long as you have something you want to do in a project, you can get it done on $100 Chromebook, like you're set. Versus with the more mechanical stuff, you need to either go to a school that has it, or something like that, right? And it's there. And like the funniest thing I see is you got these kids, they're playing like Factorio, however it's pronounced. It's like, go stop playing that game. Go run a factory.
Yeah.
So, I've had this thought in my head for a while. It's like, I want to create like a competitor to Factorio, but the only difference is it's a two-sided company. One side's a video game and the other side is like an automated ERP that I'm selling to factories. So it'll be a bunch of 13-year-olds controlling America's factories. But for real, right? So there's this barrier to entry issue that I don't really know how we solve it other than to provide as many resources as possible, because you can't just force people into it. They have to have a passion. This is one of those industries where everybody I know who's doing well in machining or manufacturing or engineering, it's like they live and breathe it. Like they're either working, designing stuff, building stuff, or they're going home and they're talking about it with other people who machine on the internet, and they're doing something in their garage. Like they just never stop. So we need to find a way to build that passion, and it's a lot easier to get kids in there like have this talent pipeline for stuff with computers, because it's just, there's a bigger pool to select from, because like there's a lot more computers than there are CNC machines that some kid can just go play with.
Yeah.
So, I'm a big advocate for having that stuff in schools. Like, props to Haas. They do these entrustments or whatever they call it to schools. They basically give schools machines. And, it's great for their business, because they're, that was one of their big marketing things. It's hard to even call it altruistic, even though it is. And it's a good thing. But like at the end of the day, they built this education pipeline. They spent a bunch of money doing it. But now all the machinists know Haas controls. So if you're a machine shop, you got all these people coming in. They all know Haas. Like, well, let's just buy the machine that our people know. So hopefully we see more and more of that, and folks catching on. I also saw recently, like Jim Bolosic with Send Cut Send. Every time he announces an initiative, the dollar figure goes up. I can't believe how much money that guy's giving away. But like, shout out to him. They're giving out a bunch of money to all these high school and college, as I understand it, robotics teams and things of that nature. And it's amazing for our industry, because if you put the resources there, folks will use them. The people who are motivated will use them. And then it's reciprocal too, because you get a whole generation of engineers coming out of these robotics teams and all sorts of stuff at high school who like, I'm getting a sheet metal part. It's coming from Send Cut Send, right? And then now they go out into engineer, like real engineering world. Where are they going to get their stuff? Like, Send Cut Send, dude. Like, I'm not going to wait for a quote. That's ridiculous, right? Just like ingrain that in their mind from like, day one, that like you just get a quote on a part and it shows up and it comes with candy. So I hope to see a lot more of that to really build up the pipeline just through resourcing early stage projects, because that'll select for the folks with motivation who can actually get this stuff across the finish line.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. First one, to think what's the places where kids can be influenced to go and think and try the machinist. So machining, it could be like, first it's family, right? So it's the most obvious place. If your kids see you as a father like doing something in the garage, that's the first thing that they can, starting to recording in their mind. So that's the first place. Second, as you mentioned, so you definitely was blessed with having machine shop in your school. It's like, it's amazing, of course. And the third thing, that if you remember, so it was almost a WeWork kind of the space for machining across the United States. I think it was like, they had like maybe 30 locations or something like that. I definitely remember visiting 2 or 3 in San Francisco and somewhere else. I can't recall the name of this company, but basically they have WeWork-like locations where you can just sign up and use the machines. CNC, laser cutters, 3D printers, all of that. They unfortunately went bankruptcy, like maybe 7 years ago, maybe even 9 years ago, like really long time ago. But the idea was very nice. Again, people sharing the equipment, people using the equipment. They, of course, running some classes to to learn from that, all of it. So maybe that's the idea for guys like Haas, for example, right? So the local manufacturer that can run something like that. Again, we work like machine shops, but not machine shops, machining areas for the people who need to produce something, basically. So maybe that's.
Yeah. I mean, they have a lot of like maker space type things around.
Yeah.
I've been frankly a little disappointed in the maker spaces, but it just, and I don't think it's any fault of anybody being lazy or having malice or anything like that, but our industry is just like not super well resourced in that category. I think a lot of folks like these, manufacturers, it's hard to find people and stuff. It's like, all right, well, go do something that's going to solve that problem for yourself. Like, give back a little bit. And some folks do it really well, where they have great training programs. They're super involved with the community. And then others, like after I graduated high school, I would, I spoke on a couple panels and stuff because, I started a machine shop out of high school instead of going to college. So I was like sort of the poster child of that program of like, hey, look at this EST program. Like, this is why we need machining in schools. And I would go to some things with the California Department of Education, and it was really, really frustrating because even of the manufacturers who were there, it would either be their first time and you'd never see them again. I probably went like 3 or 4 years to these things, and then we'd never see them again. Or it were these manufacturers who didn't really want any students with like real skills. They wanted the schools to churn out like somebody like just saw boys. Right? Make sure they know how to run the saw. And they wanted pre-trained people, and I just looked these companies up afterwards, and they're paying crap. Like, I'm like, I'm sorry, like, this is not, like if that's the end state, like, if you just want this, like, cheap labor where it's, like, sort of a pyramid where, like, it's not a pipeline right up, it's just a pyramid where, like, you start out a bunch of people down here, and then there's less people at every, and then, if this is where the living wage is right here, it's like, okay, so like that means inherently just like you have to keep a bunch of people down at that lower level, or you have to be growing, right, along with their career trajectory, which is, hopefully what it is. But these folks really, they just wanted like low paid labor that they didn't have to pay to train either. And I was like, dude, that does nothing for our industry. Like, I get that does something for you, but like, this is like, I can't in good conscience tell some kid, oh yeah, like we're going to train you to be a $17 an hour button pusher for the rest of your life, and we're going to send you off to this company who wanted you to like do, who wanted the California Department of Education to implement these standards to give them a cheap labor pipeline on the taxpayer dollar, and then never train you to actually do anything more. The future I see for our industry is more automation on the ground that is a multiplier on folks, so you aren't doing so much of the, I don't want to call it menial, but what's the word? Like you're not focused so much on making the next part, you're more focused on orchestrating the actual manufacturing process, because that's exciting. And since we're getting more and more closer to automating these machining processes and the programming of the machines, and then with Chatter, like increasing the transmission rate of data, how it gets through the shop and how it interacts with other systems, as that becomes more and more real, we see a lot more opportunities for basically to increase the number of machines per person. And at that point, now we have an industry in the United States that's actually sustainable, where I can in good conscience say, yeah, get into manufacturing. It's awesome. You're going to be around the coolest machines in the world. You're going to get paid super well because you're going to be responsible for 30 or 40 machines that are doing high dollar work, that they're just cranking out parts all day, and you get to be hands-on. You get to be hands-off with certain parts of it, and it's just going to be a freaking blast. If that was the actual outcome I could promise to high school students, then I would be all over it, right? But as it is today, it's a crapshoot. Like, a lot of the smaller shops would be really cool to work for. I've been in a lot of shops where I'd love to work there. Problem is, they don't have a whole lot of money to pay. And in some of the larger shops, there's just not a lot of like upward mobility, because you can't come in on day one and start like screwing around with the automation or whatever. It's like, no, you're on the saw, right? Or you're sweeping the saw. So, which is like fine to start there, but the positive note on that is these new smaller shops that right now can't support a huge influx of educated, high-paid folks coming in their shops. Those shops are going to be doing really, really well in the next 5 years, 10 years, 25 years. The ones who are staying ahead with technology and ahead with really killer processes and killer machines, those are the shops that are going to do really well. So I think we're going to be looking at a completely different landscape of our industry in 10 years, because these shops are going to be a lot bigger. These shops are going to be a lot bigger. The CJs of the world, the Dylans of the world, the Wands of the world, today there are 4 or 5 machines. In 10 years, these guys are going to be like behemoths of manufacturing, and they're going to scale the processes that have made them successful and made them competitive. And the work you're going to be able to do working for them is just going to be just the coolest stuff ever. So I'm really looking forward to that future. But yeah, the pipeline's a mess today.
Yeah, I think actually automation and the software will allow shops not only to grow, but actually be able to hire people that can, well, as you said, basically run multiple machines using automation, know how to use the software, and get higher paid jobs at the end of the day, right? So it's not just machining itself, but it is change through the automation and the software that I think really will allow us to get those higher paid jobs at the shops. So that's I hope the future. I mean, pretty much all of us in software/machining world working towards this future, again, to allow all of that. So yeah, I think we should be excited about that. We definitely should be excited about that. Yeah. So moving next to another interesting stuff. So obviously you just joined Toolpath like a couple days ago. So congrats on that.
Thanks.
Again, Al and the team was great. Great people, great mission, great software. So what's particularly your vision behind this partnership, this company, and how you see Toolpath will make this big shift in manufacturing and machining specifically? And
we just joined up with we joined up with Toolpath. We announced it this past Friday. It's been in the works for a few months. And for those who don't know, Toolpath is a company that does automation of toolpaths, basically geometry recognition on 3D geometry, mixed with a bunch of tooling data and speeds and feeds and all this knowledge and this engine that Justin Gray has built that can do some really, really incredible stuff around actually trying to automate the CAM process. So it's a big, big thing they're tackling, first of all. And it's really impressive what they've done. Now, I've known the team over there for over a year now. And then Al, I've known since the Autodesk days, and Tim, I've known since the Autodesk days, and they moved over there to Toolpath to sort of try to build this next level of what does programming CNC machines look like. And that sort of thought process starts with just abstractly thinking about what really does a CAM programmer do. And you're sort of doing two things, right? You're looking at a geometry on a screen, plus, I guess, a drawing to know the tolerances, right? And you're selecting that geometry, and you are adding basically strategies of toolpaths to it, right? I know that this is going to work. So you're combining that recognition of the geometry visually with your knowledge of, in your shop, how does this run, right? How is this machine going to be able to run this? What's a clever way that I can hit, these features in these operations and tell the CAM system, the CAM system can generate all the literal tool paths, right? It's all module works under the hood or whoever, but you're telling it here's the strategy, right? I'm using what I'm seeing on the screen and then my knowledge of how the shop works, right? And that a little bit is what the Toolpath Chatter joining together signifies. And this has been a thought in sort of the back of our heads for a while, because the Toolpath side of things is really good at looking at this geometry and recognizing sort of the strategies, right? How do we tackle this in an efficient way? Okay, are we going to need a roughing and then a finishing? Can we do it this way and then that way? And then tool selection and things like that. So it's really good at that. And then Chatter is sort of the eyes and ears in the shop, where we understand what's going on in the shop. We see programs that are successful. We see programs that aren't. We see programs that are improved and not. And then kind of bringing those two things together as the product progresses is going to be really, really powerful to be able to build an actual long-term sustainable system. One of my worries about a lot of CAM automation is that it's static and every shop runs different. And that's something I really didn't like about, they've come and gone, whether they're internal facing or external facing, but there's a lot of folks who have said, we're automating CAM. We're making CAM as easy as 3D printing. And I've always just been bullshit. You don't know what's going on in my shop. How would you know? Okay, you've hooked up 1 billion sensors to your machine with shunk everything and Frasia cutting tools, and then you've optimized your feed rate down to 2 inches per minute. Congratulations on your optimal feed rate. That's not going to work as soon as one thing changes, because what you measured on and spent, all this VC money or whatever on, to optimize my feed rate from 160 to 163.29, dude, this is stupid. So I didn't like that. The other thing I didn't like about monitoring, and frankly, it was never something that was exciting to me about Chatter, was how the data didn't go anywhere with the reporting, right? So we have all this real-time stuff that was really, really nice, right? And that still is the vision of Chatter from a product perspective, is how do we build this stuff that rather than measuring the red time, we compress it, right? We make it less downtime. That's really good. That's a great goal. But we're sitting on this just huge amount of data for any given shop, and it's really hard to parse through all that and actually somehow feed that back into the next job moving forward. So with these two together, it's really exciting because it makes both systems dynamic. In our little announcement video, I talked about this briefly, but it had to be 20 seconds. So I think a lot of people didn't know what I meant by that, but really, if you take one CAM system and try to apply it to every shop, right? Or even one, automation on like recipe of automation for how to machine a part. Well, I'm going to machine this part differently than the guy down the street does, than my buddy in Arizona and my buddy in Florida and my buddy in Wisconsin. Like, we're all going to do this differently, to the point where, my friends, they'll sub out work to each other, because it's like, okay, like, it's going to cost this much money if I do it, but this guy's got this machine over here where he can do it way faster. It works better in his system. The routing's better because he can get it within this timeline, and he can do it cheaper, and then, everybody's happy. So that static system just doesn't work, because it doesn't make sense for every shop to be programming a part the same way. And it also doesn't make sense for every shop to, be charging the same for every given part. Like, that system needs to have some awareness. If you apply the same one to every shop, you're just like kind of creating this suboptimal commodity thing, where it's just, let's just say, for example, you have static, completely uncustomized cam automation. Well, you're going to have to, and then you have 90% of the industry using it. Okay, how are you going to get 90%? So you're telling me that 90% of the industry is going to program the part the exact same way? Like, that's just ridiculous on its face. So what excited me about bringing Chatter and Toolpath together is, okay, now we have the opportunity to do this feedback loop. The other cool thing about it is, with Chatter, there's the monitoring, but we also have the file transfer to the machine. So one of the, not to give too much away, but one of the things I'm really, really excited about is, since we actually have the full access of CAM now through Toolpath, and the ability to put programs on machines, we can start to build in more like real-time sort of optimization. This is something that I'm going to have to prototype myself and try out, but like, one of the things I really want to do, just as a personal project that will hopefully in some amount of years become like reality, that it like scales, is just have something where you're running parts. Let's say we're running 1,000 parts or 5,000 parts, and the machine is basically A/B testing. So it's like, all right, like, we're running this tool, you go around, all right, that looked good, spindle load looks good, or whatever. Well, normally, you wouldn't fully optimize that program. Let's just say you get a program, it's a big old pallet, whatever, it takes forever, it's on a horizontal, you can't see half the stuff that's going on, but it's got these retracts, and you're like, it would be nice to pull those retracts out. That's just a waste of time, but it's not worth my time to go out and like go back to the computer, change that stuff, then I'm going to post it out, and then I'm going to get it back on the machine, then I have to re-verify that I didn't crash anything, and then save me whatever, a few seconds, right? There's all sorts of stuff. Like, you could go all day and you'd still have all sorts of stuff that you could optimize in a program. Or I think I can get a little bit more out of that tool. I think I can speed that up a bit. I can hear it. It's not really doing a whole lot in that cut. Let's just crank that up. Or it's all these little things that can add up. Sometimes they're a big enough deal to go through the pain of reposting a program and revalidating it, but sometimes they're not. And to build a system that can actually make those observe what's going on, make the changes, commission them, record the results, and then say, hey, here's what we did. Like, we changed this. This is the result. Do you want to continue with this, or do you want to revert back? We could do all these things, and the same applies to things like tool life, etc. So sort of that live optimization, live A/B testing, I think is going to be something that's really cool, and it's going to be, that's when we start getting to this level of like this living, breathing, autonomous shop where it's not just static. We've actually created a brain, but we need to start with the connectivity layer, because we need to be able to talk to these machines reliably, and then from there, with the Toolpath technology matched with the Chatter technology, not only are we informing what's going on the Toolpath side as far as making sure that those estimates and those CAM automations and Toolpaths and everything are tied realistically to the capabilities of the shop and the special strategies and tooling and all this stuff that the shop has. It also makes its way onto the shop floor and sort of self-optimizes in a way that is private to the shop. I mentioned earlier, you don't want to commoditize these shops, and so much of this industry is like this tribal knowledge that's built into shops, where like there's just really clever stuff that these shops do that they're just like, oh, I kill it in this category because I have this special way that I do these, and these special tricks. Well, you don't really want to publicize those tricks. A lot of people share around, which is a really cool part of our industry, the whole Insta-Machinist thing and everything. But maybe you do, maybe you don't want to publicize that stuff. But the last thing you want to do is feed Chatter Toolpath's model, and then now all of a sudden, like the guy down the street, like basically like we just stole your like your tricks. But the other thing you don't want is, okay, well, I have all these tricks that make me competitive, but then we have this automated piece of software that doesn't know my tricks, right? What you want is to have this silo of data. Like, here's my essentially training model, training data set of my shop, where this is secure, it's not shared with anybody, and this system is sort of pair programming with me. It's learning off what I'm doing, I'm feeding into it, it's feeding into me, and then basically the results that it's giving me are, take into account all the special things my shop can do, take into account the capabilities, the limitation, lessons learned, all those things kind of get built in. So that's what I'm really, really excited to see happen for the industry.
Yeah, it's super cool. Again, the combination of basically a feedback loop and strategies, that's what amazing, I guess, for the machine shops. And it's really resonate with what we do, like on estimation side, on the CAT pricing and everything, because again, there's no identical shops at all. So all of them, even though they can use the exact same equipment, their pricing is always very, very different. And what's now, I think, rising, which is good, I guess, that people starting to think that, okay, so geometrical driven pricing, that's the one thing. But there's actually some other stuff, like basically some other variables that competition, maybe market, maybe your like specific components, like is this customer is really hard to work with? I they need some compliance, certification, all of that. So all those information is really, in most of the cases for the machine shop, they sitting in just in their heads, not in ERP system, not in some like data storage. It just sitting here, and it's not scalable. It's not scalable, especially if you're like, you're a small shop, you're an owner that estimating pretty much every single job. You just can't hire someone who going to do this job for you so you can focus on other things. That's impossible. You have to digitize that. But again, to digitize that, you have to implement the system. So you just can't run the business, scale the business without the system. So yeah, so again, I hear a lot of similarities, of course, in between like programming, toolpath, and just estimating, of course. Obviously, it's all very similar in a way. There's the other thing of the software in manufacturing, obviously. So we're talking about all those technologies, and again, I'm including Digifab. So is also like kind of novel technology for machine shops, even though we're been around for 10 years. Basically, it's not really new. But again, shops finally starting to realizing, okay, so it's actually the urgency is actually big need. It's actually like it's essential now. It's not just nice to have thing. So how you at Toolpath and Chatter? Well, first of all, thinking about your customers, specifically what types of the shops are the best fit for your ICP. And secondly, of course, how you create the urgency. So like, guys, you actually need this thing tomorrow. Because again, as you know, in B2B world, in SaaS world, it's always like your product can be just the best. But again, no one need it before you actually start into pushing that. So yeah. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of already pointed it out. We're just at the point where you have to have the stuff to be competitive. So, it's coming like a tidal wave. The technology's coming, and the people are coming to the technology. And honestly, the scariest part is being able to keep up with all like that rate, right? Because, pretty much everybody I meet with, and probably everybody you meet with, I'd assume one of their biggest reason, or the first question I ask with, I'm like, all right, so like, what are you looking to get out of Chatter? And they say, oh, well, like it's time we like get with this technology. Like, it's just like, some version of like, we have to do this at this point. Like, the other shops are doing it. This is obviously the future. We need to stay competitive, which I think introduces a pretty interesting like dynamic from the seat that you or I are in, and it's exciting too, because we actually have to educate people on like, how do you like how we want our software to be used, and we're actually sort of defining the future, because a lot of folks come in, some people like they know the exact feature, right? Hey, I want to know my spindle hours, or I want this feature, that feature, right? I want text messages. But a lot of folks, I'm seeing more and more, even just in the past year, of more and more people saying, you know what, show me what it does, because all I know is that this is what other shops are doing and they're killing it, and we have to get on this train, or else like there's all these different pieces of technology we need to integrate. So I think it's really fun, and then you can just kind of learn about their shop, and then it becomes a little bit of a choose your own adventure game in terms of what can we show them that's going to be useful based on their needs, and then those things start to click as it builds out. The other thing that this sort of dovetails into, I mean, props to the Toolpath team. They're really great at product and introducing new things to the market. For those who don't know, Al, our CEO, and Tim, our Chief Customer Officer, are really integral to the sort of inception and creation and initial commercial success of Fusion 360, which is sort of the most recent big disruption in really software for CNC at all. That like I don't think anything's hit on that level in decades, just with the scale of it. And as you know, just super aggressive on the pricing, but really what they were aggressive on is their go-to-market strategy in terms of implementation. Like the difference with Fusion that I found was that you could kind of go in on day one and get at least some use out of it. There wasn't a lot of like pre setup you had to do. Like Feature Cam, I tried to download like Feature Cam one time just to see what it was about, and I couldn't get anything out of Feature Cam until I had like a billion tools and parameters and rules and stuff in there. And I'm probably explaining it wrong because I don't know how to use Feature Cam, but I was just like, okay, like this is I can't even play around with this. But Fusion was created in a way that it's really easy to get in there, play around with, and then adopt incrementally, right? You don't need to be using all the fancy stuff it can do off the bat. You can just have it mill a line, right? And you don't need to even have a tool library really, and you can use some generic post or whatever. And they made the post free. So all these things that make it easy to get into that ecosystem is sort of similar to what we're doing with Chatter and Toolpath, where we want to deliver value on day one, and we don't want it to be a huge disruption to your shop to implement this new system. Especially when you get into larger shops, there's just all this hassle every time. Okay, management has instituted some new policy, right? We have this. We've added another piece of software, which means you need another tab open at the screen next to your machine, and you got to log this. Now you have to check into jobs. Now you need to mark setup time. Blah 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 blah. All this stuff, and it makes implementing new software very, very hard. So one of the things I'm excited about with both the Chatter and Toolpath products and as they kind of come together more and more and sort of become one is that incremental adoption where folks can start using it for like one specific thing. Like a lot of people who use Chatter, their first experience with Chatter is just simply using the Visual Studio Code plugin, where they can transfer files to their machines without USB drives, and they can see what's on their machine in real time over their network. Now, for us, I'll give you a little bit of the behind the curtain of that thing. There are FTP clients out there already, right? There's FileZilla, there's WinSCP, and a billion. You can use your command line, right? There's all this stuff you can use. But the reason I came out with that plugin was because I wanted people to network their machines. Because once you have the file transfer, now your machine's networked. It's only one more setting you need to change. You just have to turn on data collection. And now all of a sudden, you're compatible with Chatter. You can download the desktop connector. You don't even need the hardware. You can put it on a Raspberry Pi, whatever, right? And now you're connected. So, and then the other part of it is I wanted it to be a tool where you and I are very familiar with FTP. There's a lot of shop owners and machines who are familiar with FTP and all these different things. There's also a much bigger portion of folks in the industry who they're not familiar with it, and not because they can't learn it. I mean, they know how to use a CNC machine. Like, it's not that they don't know how to do that, but they're like, I'm so freaking busy. FTP, SFTP, whatever. Don't bother me with it. Like, just drag it onto my machine. Why are there so many buttons in FileZilla? Like, I don't want to know what any of this is. Just so that's why we made the VS Code extension, which is free, right? It's like, okay, you're already using this. Let's add this little FTP thing on it. We stripped out all the buttons. We changed, and now it says machine, add your machine, right? Blah blah blah. Like, make it super easy. And then that's sort of an onboard ramp to, okay, like we've used Chatter with the file transfer. Let's see what this monitoring is about. And then immediately when you log into the Chatter application now, your first time, it's going to say, hey, would you like to set up notifications, right? And then, that's an easy, I don't really need to change my workflow at all to start getting these notifications if a machine's idle, if there's an alarm. So sure, let's set that up. And then from there, there's sort of this user journey where you can set up more and more stuff that as you're getting value initially out of it, you can start to get deeper and find what parts of the software are super valuable, because there's some things, especially as we get more and more automated, that are going to need to be done, like non-negotiable on, hey, you got to have these macros set up. Maybe in the future we have some things we do with simulation or whatever. Well, you're going to have to make sure your machine is set up in 3D for simulation. Like, those are things that kind of come later, but you don't want that as a requirement for somebody to become a user. You want to solve acute problems and then start working them down that journey. And, we're a young company. We have a lot of stuff we're going to build in the next few years, and it's not like we're just like staying in stealth until we have something that we're like, oh, we built the perfect cam automation, and people start using it, and everybody's like, yeah, this doesn't work. It only worked in your shop. We're like, crap, we just wasted 10 years. So we're doing this incremental stuff and introducing incremental features that our customers can give feedback. This is why it's really fun to be an early customer. I was an early user of Fusion. We had a lot of early Chatter users. We have a lot of early Toolpath users where they're shaping the product and giving their feedback as they go. My role as head of product is fun. I'm just sort of starting out working with our customers and our customer advisory board to take that feedback and figure out, how that translates into a product and a product strategy and into the technology and all that stuff. So it's really fun to work with those customers who are shaping our journey and on it with us. So that's awesome. The other thing too is that doesn't go away. It's not like you're necessarily missing the train, because as we build this product out, now we have naturally built these stepping stones of integration where maybe we're 5 years into something or 10 years in, and we've been building up throughout. It's like, well, now we have a really nice user journey that they can follow by just starting at these small little things and building up and up into into using more of the system and being more reliant on it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And specifically this approach where all it takes is just have this one key user scenario that cover it, and that's it. Mm-hmm. It needs to be as simple, as stupid as possible, like extremely, like even if it's like something that can be done with some different software, of course, like FTP you mentioned, right? So it can be done. But again, it's specifically designed for manufacturing, specifically designed for your CNC machines and all of that. And this little trick basically grab your attention and bring you into ecosystem. That, of course, you don't need to uncover the whole ecosystem on day one. Mm-hmm. It needs to be customer journey. So I think that's super important part of the software, specifically in the manufacturing space, because again, we know all the manufacturers extremely busy with production, with everything, running the shops, wearing multiple hats. So the software just needs to be as easy as possible. So, and again, I am probably know the answer, but again, I would like to ask, so what do you think software companies in manufacturing, what needs to be done better than they're doing now to have real impact for machine shops? So I have my answer on that, and again, we partially talked about that, but what's your take on that?
They need to stop making stupid excuses. Mm-hmm. I mean, basically to the thing you just said, where I'll say this a little bit more bluntly. A lot of industrial software expects you to do everything and drop all of what you're doing and then do it their exact way. I mean, the worst offenders at this are, I just realized I'm fiddling with my headphones on camera. The worst offenders of this are ERP systems, where many ERP systems require you to run your shop their way. Sorry, that's not good business, but it's also not a good piece of software. The days of that are kind of over. What we need is flexible systems that actually have some respect for the fact that the customer's busy. They're not going to shut down your shop, or they're not going to shut down their shop just to have you come in and implement your fancy software and then change the entire way they've been running a business for 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 years because your, Mr. Computer guy said, it needs to be run this way. And then, because really what that ends up with is either upset customers who don't stick, or you end up with hybrid processes very often. I see this all the time with ERPs and all sorts of different systems where, well, we kind of use our ERP. We're using this part, but the way it wants us to do this isn't how we do it. So we do that over in Airtable. It's like, dude, and I don't blame the customer at all. I blame the people who made the software for not listening to their customers and not being respectful that customer has something to do besides deal with your own software. And I'm raising my voice at myself just as much as I am at every other company right now, because it's something I just try to just jam into my brain every day. It's you're not the center of attention here. The customer is, and you see this with machine tool builders, or like I was talking about at the beginning of this, right? With those MT Connect integration box. It was, for me as a machine shop owner, I lived the frustration where I'm like, why do I need to talk to this guy and that guy and get a quote for this box or whatever? Just have the machine talk to some service and then let me see it on my phone. Which, a lot of folks who know so much about Industry 4.0 will tell you, oh no, it's much more complicated than that. You need the MT Connect adapter because this, and you need the agent and yada, yada, yada. And it's dude, okay, you're probably right, but I don't care. I'm just going to go back to running my machines and I'm not going to use your stuff. So I just make sure every day that I never want to become that. And because there always is a technical solution and there always is a product solution, rather than just making excuses. Oh, connectivity is hard and there's these protocols. And it's like, no. Like, at the end of the day, you need to have some respect for what the customer's telling you they're frustrated with and do something about it.
Yeah, we definitely need to continue simplifying all of that. Onboarding, software itself, self-servicing, all of that. Because again, at the end of the day, I completely agree. It's all about respecting your customers and their time. Because yeah, that's all. That's all what's important, actually. Yeah, very cool, very cool. It was great chat, Pete. It was amazing.
I enjoyed it.
Let's do it again for sure.
Absolutely, man.
I really looking forward for the Toolpath and Chatter.
Me too.
Making this industry better together. So that's amazing. Yeah.
Awesome, man. It's good chatting.
Thank you so much, man. Alrighty. Thank you. Bye.